Welcome to Westminster at Worship. Our worship services are at 8:15, 9:30, and 11 o'clock on Sunday morning.
How can we love a person whom we do not know? How can we love a person with whom we have not shared experiences? Do you love Jesus? Do you know Jesus? Have you shared experiences with Jesus? I do and have done workshops across the United States in Presbyterian churches on experiencing Jesus, at the conclusion of which Presbyterian elders have said, you know, for the first time in my life, I feel like I know Jesus. Today we're going to work on experiencing Jesus, experiencing the temptations of Jesus. I want us to think about this passage in Matthew 4, and I want us to experience with Jesus three common killer temptations and identify with Jesus as we experience these temptations with Jesus. The passage goes like this. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights. Now, by the way, that's a biblical idiom. It's an idiom in Hebrew and in Greek. It means a long time, long enough. You remember how long it rained in the Noah flood story? 40 days and 40 nights. You remember how long the children of Israel were in the wilderness? 40 years. 40 means long enough. It's the same kind of thing as the English idiom, a month of Sundays. 40 days and 40 nights. Long enough. And afterwards he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, if you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread. As it is written, but Jesus answered, it is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Now I want us to experience that temptation. How often have you been tempted to turn stones into bread? I doubt you have. But Jesus' response tells us the real meaning of this temptation. The temptation is to give a higher priority to material things than to your spiritual life. Have you ever been tempted to do that? To subordinate your spiritual life to worrying about your material things? Ever been tempted to do that? Sure, we all are worried about the 401ks, right now especially. We're worried about our houses, our cars, our businesses, and we spend a whole lot more energy thinking about those things than we do about our spiritual life, don't we? We're tempted to do that every day, aren't we? Jesus' response from Deuteronomy 8:3 was, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. In your last breath, are you more concerned about your car or your spiritual life? The next temptation. Then the devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, if you're the Son of God, throw yourself down. For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up so that you will not dash your foot against a stone. And Jesus said to him, again it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test. Now let's talk about what the pinnacle of the temple was not the top of a building. The pinnacle of the temple is the southeast corner of the wall around the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It's a wall that encompasses 10 acres, where today sits the mosque called the Dome of the Rock, and also the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and this is a Muslim area at this point, one of their holy sites. But at this time, the temple sat there, but this southeast corner was the highest point above the ground. And if you jumped off there, the fall wouldn't kill you, but when you hit the ground, it would. And the thing was, the temptation here, as given to us by Jesus' response, is to take responsibility for yourself, for your words and your deeds, your actions, your speech, things you have done in the course of your life. How many times are you tempted to put the blame on somebody else? If nobody else, at least to say, the devil made me do it. How often are we tempted to try to shove off our responsibility, particularly at times when we think we are going to do something rather stupid and God will bail me out? And Jesus' response is, do not put the Lord your God to the test. And that comes from a passage, Deuteronomy 6:16, which refers to a passage in Exodus where Moses is leading the people in the wilderness, and they come to Massah, and they start saying, we want some water. And Moses talks to God. God says, go hit the rock and get them some water. But the people were saying, is Yahweh among us or not? Testing God. And the passage is, do not test God as you did at Massah and Meribah. Massah meaning testing and Meribah meaning quarreling. Do not test God as you did at Massah and Meribah. And that passage is repeated over and over in the Old Testament, and Jesus is now repeating it as a response to this temptation. Do not put the Lord your God to the test. I've got a friend who says, Lord, if you'll just let me make this putt, I'll never do a bad thing the rest of my life. Sounds awful lot like putting God to the test. And so we have to watch about this testing God, not taking responsibility for ourselves. The third temptation. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said to him, all these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. Jesus said to him, away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him. Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him. Well, have you ever been tempted to take over the world? No, but you can share this temptation and identify with Jesus in this temptation if you've ever been tempted to take responsibility for someone God didn't make you responsible for. You know, sometimes spouses think they need to be responsible for their spouses, to pick them up and carry them on their shoulders before they're non-compos mentis. Now, if you have a spouse who is non-compos mentis, God has asked you to take responsibility there. But otherwise, you're not responsible for your spouse, you're responsible to your spouse. Usually, with exceptions, we're responsible for ourselves and for our young children. There are some other instances where we have to take responsibility. You're not responsible for your coworkers. You're not responsible for your employees. When we try to take responsibility for someone God has not made us responsible for, we rape that person spiritually. When you try to pick them up and put them on your shoulders and carry them, all you succeed in doing is digging yourself into the ground. I dare say many, if not all of you, can identify with that temptation and experience that with Jesus, where you have tried to tell someone what they should think, how they should believe, how they should act. The temptation is to play God. And Jesus resisted that by saying, worship the Lord your God and serve only Him. You're not God. Now, Jesus' responses, all three of these responses come from the great Shema. The great Shema is in Deuteronomy 6, 7, and 8. The great Shema, the word Shema means listen or hear. It starts out by saying, Shema, O Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord Yahweh is our God. Yahweh is the one God. And then it goes on, the next verse, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And these were the first words that all Hebrew children are taught, the Shema. That's what Paul was taught. Jesus was taught this as the first thing he learned. They're his ABCs of his faith. And so when he is tempted, he calls on that which he knows the best. He calls on that which he has learned as a child to refute and respond to these temptations. He is confident in his personal faith and uses that faith to defeat temptation. Now, the challenge today to you, the challenge is to share Jesus' experiences in his life, his birth, his baptism, his temptations, his spiritual death, his spiritual resurrection, his transfiguration, these pivotal events in Jesus' life, to share those and identify with Jesus. I challenge you to do that. So that we can know Jesus and so that you can know and love Jesus by identifying with him. I challenge you, based on these temptations, to give top priority in your life to your spiritual life. Let me suggest one way that you might do that this week, when the big hand hits 12 during your waking hours. When the big hand hits 12, stop for 30 seconds and think about your spirituality this week. Just try that. Can you give 30 seconds to God each hour? Put your spiritual life first. Give top priority. Secondly, I challenge you to take full responsibility for all aspects of your life. You're going to need, in order to do that, you're going to need to use the great intangible gifts of God. Those gifts of love, peace of mind, calmness of spirit, wisdom, patience, etc., that God has placed as close to you as your elbow. You're going to need to use those in order to take full responsibility for all aspects of your life. I also want to challenge you to respect the rights of others and treat them as equals. Don't try to play God with them. Let God be God. You treat them as equals. You love them as equals. You deal with them as equals. And lastly, I challenge you to grow your personal faith with a passion so that when the temptations of life come to you, you will be able to defeat them. Because you will know what you believe. You see, over my period of years in the church, I have discovered that church people, in the main, with notable exceptions, don't know what they personally believe. I have found that most church people know what they've been told to believe and they know what they're expected to believe, but they have not worked diligently to determine what they personally believe. And no matter how hard you work on your mind to learn, no matter how hard you work on your body to look good, no matter how hard you work on your psyche to feel good, no matter how hard you work on your career to make money, no matter how hard you do all those things, if you don't work on your spiritual life, life at its best will always be beyond your grasp. But the more you bring your personal faith to conscious expression, the better you can know yourself and understand yourself, the better you can accept yourself and love yourself. The better you love yourself, the more likely you are to love another person unconditionally and to love God more as you understand God. Then you can live life at its best. Then you can truly experience personal faith with a passion. Each of us needs to take the responsibility to clarify our faith so that when we're faced with these three great, deadly, common temptations, our faith can defeat them. And so whenever other temptations come into our lives, we have the faith to defeat them. Amen.